Greetings, my fellow students. Welcome back to another lecture. I see your desire to know more about both the Jedi and the Sith has increased. Very well. Prepare to fulfill your destiny and learn all about both the Jedi and the Sith Chosen One prophecy. The Jedi Chosen One prophecy was something that guided the history of Star Wars itself, with Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, and many of his descendants signifying the most powerful lineage in history. The Skywalker lineage, possessing one of, if not the greatest Force connection out of any single family in history. The Skywalkers changed the galaxy for better and for worse across galactic history, and eternally scorched their mark and etched themselves into the pages of history itself, as something that not even anyone until the rise of Palpatine would ever accomplish. Beings such as Luke Skywalker, Cade Skywalker, and Anakin Skywalker were some of the most notable among them. But today we are going to be exploring about the prophecy that made the Skywalkers so famous, that being the Jedi Chosen One prophecy. One of the most mysterious and controversial aspects in all of the lore, despite literally defining the very flow of the Force and the galaxy for many, many millennia to come. The Jedi Chosen One prophecy began with Anakin Skywalker, the prophesied Chosen One, who eventually became the Sith Lord Darth Vader. Without the Skywalkers, not only would Palpatine never have risen to power, but balance would never have been brought to the Force, and Palpatine would never have been erased by Luke Skywalker, both aboard the second Death Star, and in the event of Dark Empire. The Sith would still rule the galaxy, and without the Skywalkers, the entirety of the galactic history would be so much different. But today, we are going to be exploring the alternate evil to this Jedi Chosen One prophecy, that being the Sith Ari, the Jedi answer to the Chosen One prophecy. This was the Sith's answer to what the Jedi had come to see as their fabled Chosen One prophecy. The Sith saw the Sith Ari as a perfect being, a being who would be free of all limits, and would completely test the dark side that would rebuild the Sith, but in the same time destroy them. Darth, Bane, and King Adas were two notable beings who were candidates for the Sith Ari. But today we are not going to be exploring who was the Sith Ari, but in regards, who was the alter ego to Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. Not the Sith Ari, but the Sith Chosen One. The Sith Ari was an overlord and a god among his people, and was widely regarded as the greatest Sith Lord to have ever lived. We are going to be exploring very similar traits to Anakin, but in the Sith. Beings like Darth Vectivus, beings like Darth Plagueis step aside, as today we are going to be in the presence of true masters. When thinking on Sith Lords who rival the power of Anakin Skywalker and a prodigy in their youth, I can only really think of three who come to mind. These three being quite obvious as some of the most powerful beings in all of galactic history. Number one, we have Emperor Vitiate, Valkorion, Tenebrae. Emperor Vitiate was a Sith Lord so powerful in the Old Republic, he maintained control virtually unchallenged of the Sith Empire for over 1,500 years. Eventually he founded the Eternal Empire, and later he eventually was killed. However, we have to acknowledge that he was a prodigy growing up. By just the young age of 6, Tenebrae had already fluently learned how to force choke despite having no formal training, fluently snapping his stepfather's neck and stoking the flames of the dark side within him. Afterwards, Tenebrae went on to torture his own mother for months with the Force, before finally ending her life too, driving her mad, and only then did Tenebrae kill him. He then went on a crusade over his home planet of Medras, later known as Nathema, the ancient world that Vitiate would suck dry of pure Force energy. Emperor Vitiate proceeded to lead a brutal campaign across the galaxy itself, uniting all colonies of the Thema under his rule. Some followed him out of fear or out of fanaticism, but all bowed down to his power. Eventually, his biological father, Lord Drathma, eventually emerged to see the rumours about the young boy, seeing him viewed as powerful, and whether he should be killed as viewed as a threat, or he should become one of his servants, viewing Tenebrae as a child and nothing more. Tenebrae literally stripped the man insane, and stripped him of his connection to the Force, driving him insane and entombing him within the Dark Citadel. And only then did Tenebrae continue gorging upon his soul for the next 1,000 years to sustain his thoughts. The unfathomable power of Vitiate is something we have covered numerous times here on the channel, and is a being who is so unfathomably powerful, only rivaled by both Nihilus and Palpatine. Speaking of Palpatine, following this, we have Palpatine. Palpatine was a prodigy in his youth, without even having any formal training at all and being a college student. Palpatine was capable of hiding his Force sensitivity from a being such as Darth Plagueis, a Sith who was at the time relative to a being like Mace Windu and Grandmaster Yoda in terms of Force strength. Although I personally believe he was superior to Mace, but far less than Yoda. He was able to mask his appearance from Plagueis, despite the fact Plagueis was the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith that time, having recently murdered his own master in Darth Tenebris. Palpatine began to show extremely powerful signs of innate Force sensitivity, being able to generate powerful Force lightning beyond anything Plagueis had ever seen. Palpatine was able to fluently Force choke and manipulate the Force in such conventional ways during the first year of his apprenticeship. Palpatine was a master of dueling and the Force, with Palpatine quickly adapting to his master's harsh and unique training methods in order to train the young Sheev. Palpatine eventually learned to master Force lightning, and by the time of the Phantom Menace, despite having a few decades of training, and Plagueis being well over a century at the time, and being trained from birth, Palpatine was well ready to surpass his master, using elaborate deception and Force techniques such as lightning to utterly obliterate the Mon Sith Lord. Upon killing Plagueis, Palpatine felt the dark side actively anointing him, granting him the title of Dark Lord of the Sith, and flooding him with pure dark side energy that was almost unprecedented. Palpatine, even from an early age, was a literal definition of a sociopath, having a mental conditioning very similar to autism and ADHD. Palpatine was cool, calm, and collected. Every move he made was strategic. Everyone who questioned him was silenced. Everyone who opposed him was crushed. He got away with everything, while hiding in plain sight. Palpatine was a natural innate genius, being a being who was naturally strategic thinking and wise in the political standards of the ways of the Force. Palpatine managed to manipulate the entire galaxy, using his masterful political experience. And even at an early age, during his senatorial days as a senator from Naboo and a representative from that planet, Palpatine still managed to manipulate and pull the strings along with his master Darth Plagueis, ultimately allowing him to ascend to the rank of Supreme Chancellor. Of course, after this, Palpatine then killed Plagueis and claimed the moniker of Dark Lord of the Sith, wanting to make Maul his apprentice. However, Maul's death and supposed demise at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Naboo and Darth Plagueis' murder revolved roughly around the exact same time. The final candidate we have for this, we have Darth Bane. Darth Bane started the Rule of Two, founding it, which would be the primary Sith doctrine for the next 1,000 years, and would ultimately guide the Sith towards unprecedented success, as they completely exterminated the Jedi Order. Darth Bane started it all, with him barely having to ignite his lightsaber or lift a finger, using cunning and guile as well as manipulation in order to trick Lord Khan, the most powerful Sith at the time save for Bane, and the leader of the Brotherhood of Darkness, into doubting himself. Bane used his manipulative tactics and quickly ascended through the ranks of the Sith. Just a few weeks into his training, Bane was capable of defeating a fellow rival student there, and eventually he was even able to defeat and humiliate the campus's primary master, that of Sirac. Bane eventually became so powerful he was able to stand up and surpass his own teachers in not only lightsaber combat, but in that of the Force. Bane brutalized other students into submission. Beings such as Githany feared him. Even Sirac, a Zabrak Sith Lord who was in training on Korriban, was a being who feared Bane, seeing him as a threat to his power. Although Bane's fire with the dark side was briefly diminished after he had murdered the Ithorian Sith apprentice that he had killed during a sparring session, he eventually regained it, allowing him to complete some numerous Force feats while still in his youth. Darth Bane also had his latent Force sensitivity manifest in exclusive ways, with him being able to use the Force to predict the outcome of sabacc games, always knowing where to move and where to place his card every single time, always knowing what his opponent was going to do next. Bane possessed an exceptionally powerful precognitive abilities, allowing him to peer into the future and sense what his opponent was going to do next without any formal training in the ways of the Force. Bane eventually, when he was a young man, was capable of, after having a severe beating from his father, who called him the bane of his existence, the moniker he would one day adopt. Bane literally curled up in his bed, barely able to sleep due to the bruises, thinking the same line over and over again. I hope you die. I hope you die. He imagined a fist going out and clenching his father's heart. In the morning, he was surprised to figure out that his efforts had been successful, as he successfully caused his father to have a heart attack. With this out of the way, we finally have to analyse what made Anakin so powerful. Anakin's midichlorian count was nigh unrivaled, and there are three important factors we have to take into account when considering who was the alter ego to the Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one of the Jedi prophecy. First, we have to take into account his natural Force sensitivity. Anakin was a prodigy with the Force, being able to complete various tests in half the time despite having half the training as his other pupils did, always outshined his other fellow students. There was no one who rivaled Anakin, even as he grew into adulthood, and when he became, after the Clone Wars, and he became Darth Vader. He was rivaling that of Grandmaster Yoda in pure Force power, and by the time of Darth Vader, you could argue that in Return of the Jedi, he was actually equal or even superior to that of Grandmaster Yoda in his prime. So Force sensitivity is something enormous to count here. The next thing, we have lightsaber ability. Anakin was capable of brutalizing Dooku into submission, fighting against Obi-Wan Kenobi in various sparring sessions, and eventually holding his own against the Jedi Master on Mustafar, only losing due to a combination of being arrogant and Obi-Wan knowing Anakin too well. Anakin was capable of using his dueling methods in order to deflect a Jedi Temple destroying super laser with just his lightsaber, although he was using Force augmentation at the time. Even after stepping himself on the dark side and becoming Darth Vader, Anakin was capable of rivaling some of the greatest duelists in history, being able to batter down less experienced Jedi with one hit if he chose to. Anakin never utilized nothing less than a killing blow in every single strike, and his lightsaber was ignited. He poured his heart and body into every single strike. The final thing that we have his personality. This might seem like a merely insignificant one, but we have to acknowledge this. Anakin had a very conflicting and arrogant personality, so we have to look into their personalities to deduce which one is the most arrogant and which one is most like Anakin. We'll go through each of the categories individually. Starting off with the natural Force sensitivity, Darth Bane comes in third place. He was estimated having a midichlorian count a bit higher than 18,000 per cell, which is very high, rivaling that of Yoda and Darth Revan. However, Palpatine outweighs him, coming in at the number second position, with 20,000 plus midichlorians per cell, with some even speculating this number is as high as 21,000, which is unfathomably high, surpassing every Force user of his generation until the rise of Anakin, and over 3,000 midichlorians higher than his own master in Plagueis. Finally, the number one position is Vitiate. Vitiate was speculated having a midichlorian count upwards of 25,000 midichlorians per cell. He was a rare exception for his time, as many Sith Lords paled in comparison to Palpatine's 20,000. Because of this, Vitiate was capable of exerting a numerous amounts of Force feats over his subjects, and go unrivaled through his entire history. And he was even strong enough at the age 13 to be acknowledged as an equal and rival by Dark Lord of the Sith Marka Ragnos, the leader of the Sith Council. Now, we have lightsaber combat. Coming in last place, we obviously have Vitiate. Vitiate, while exceptionally skilled, was capable of using the lightsaber, but was regarded by both Darth Revan, Lord Scourge, and Mitra Surik as being less experienced with it, with Vitiate focusing on the mysticism of the Force primarily in order to be able to utilize it in its fullest extent, seeing lightsaber affairs as tedious affairs. Speaking of that, next we have a tie between Darth Bane and Palpatine. If I had to give the edge to someone, I would slightly give it to Palpatine only just. But this isn't to discredit Darth Bane. Darth Bane was a master of both Sarisu and a Gem So, utilizing his Orbitalist protection that was immune to lightsaber strikes and most other Force techniques in order to absolutely batter down the defenses of his opponent. With only a few weak chinks in his armor, Darth Bane was capable of walking out into a rainstorm and implementing Sarisu in such a way. He was capable of causing every single drop of drain to be redirected from him, purely by his use of the blade, and not through use of the Force. Palpatine was capable of handily defeating Savage Opress and Darth Maul almost effortlessly, cluttered down 3 highly decorated Jedi Masters in seconds, Say Tin, Agen Kola, and later slew the formidable Kit Fisto only seconds later. He later went on to duel Mace Windu, and would have fought him to a stalemate if not for further amplification for Anakin Skywalker's fear. Palpatine was even able to duel against Grand Master Yoda. However, the Grand Master, who had studied his own form intensely for over 800 years, ultimately paled in comparison to Palpatine. Palpatine fell, and was forced to sheath his lightsaber in fear of the Grand Master's wrath. The final category we have is that of personality, which I believe is the most important. Growing up, Darth Bane wasn't arrogant, which is why he gains the last place. Darth Bane never had confidence in his abilities, and only saw himself as a desert miner on a backwater planet, Patros, mining for Cortosis. Darth Bane eventually was killed by his own apprentice Zana. He wasn't arrogant, but he believed he would defeat Darth Zana, which is the primary reason he ranks last. Anakin Skywalker was exceptionally arrogant, and often caused him to make numerous amounts of mistakes, but Darth Bane seemed to prove no arrogance whatsoever, and purely saw himself as superior to beings around him who he knew was inferior to him. Following this, we have Darth Sidious, Palpatine. Palpatine was capable of not being very arrogant, never overestimating his abilities. However, there is one instance we have to take into account: his lightsaber skills. Palpatine believed that he was the greatest duelist in the galaxy, surpassing that of both Yoda and Mace Windu. However, once Dooku fought Yoda to a stalemate on Geonosis, who Palpatine believed were both inferior, he believed that his own saber skills would not match up to both Yoda and to Dooku, as he believed that Dooku, Mace Windu, and Yoda were now superior to him. Palpatine thought the Sith had grown beyond lightsabers and didn't need to be better than the Jedi, although he wanted to be. This caused a multitude of fury and anger within him, as he began to question his own lightsaber skills, and this shows a numerous amount of arrogance within him. Coming at the number 1 position, we have Darth Vitiate. What other explanation is there? Vitiate was never arrogant. He always let the events play out with him, and was happy with ensuing plans that were centuries in the making. Vitiate was capable of content, patient, calm. He was content with waiting, sitting on the sidelines and learning himself in more dark side lore while he waited for his Dark Council to deal with the political affairs of the Empire. Vitiate was so formidable that in the end he was capable of defeating a strike force of both Jedi and Sith, consisting of Revan, Grand Master Satele Shan, the Outlander, almost effortlessly, although after the Force apparitions of everyone he had ever heard encountered him, he was eventually overthrown. So my friends, what did you think of this video? In conclusion, I would say that Palpatine is, while not the perfect iteration of the Chosen One in the dark side, he is number 2, Darth Bane is number 3, and Vitiate takes number 1. Vitiate's innate skill was just unrivaled in all of Sith lore. Vitiate's personality and traits rivaled Anakin's mostly, due to the fact that he wasn't arrogant. He was perfect. He was a being that was purely content with waiting while his plans were put into motion. And that is purely why, in the end, Vitiate ranks number 1, as the pure dark side embodiment of the Sith Chosen One. Well, my friends, remember, kneel before the dragon of Zakuul, and I'll see you in a galaxy far, far away. And remember, peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me.